Don't worry, this isn't a political video. I'm just using the Indy fedora as a thinking cap. So I wrote a script to an anthology TV show called Tales from the Foxhole, which is essentially, think if The Twilight Zone was aired on the History Channel as opposed to CBS. It consists of 2 short films based in certain places in history, with some supernatural elements to it. And for the pilot episode, the second story took place during World War I. So not really to get into any spoilers or anything like that, but it involves an African-American pilot in the French Flying Corps and a single division of the U.S. Tank Corps. And by single, I literally mean just one tank, so I'm not even sure it's like a division. But while writing it, it got me thinking, what did the U.S. Tank Corps wear during World War I? Because if you watched a film like Fury, then you know what American tankers wore during the Second World War. I mean, I know Fury is not really that good of an example, but still. But what did they wear during the Great War? Any fellow screenwriters who are writing a film about American tankers during the First World War, please feel free to take notes. So here's the thing. We entered the war very late. I mean, like late 1917. So we didn't really have that much time to form our own fully functioning tank division. We basically borrowed tanks from the British and the French. And we were rather so ill-equipped that we didn't really have a proper uniform for these specific soldiers in tank divisions to wear, unlike all the other European powers. So at first we just started off with them wearing the standard M1912/M1917 uniform that you see right here. But it turns out that soldiers found it very uncomfortable to wear in such an enclosed space, and they had a lot of trouble getting in and out of these tanks wearing their full uniforms. Think of that scene from The Incredibles where Syndrome's henchmen are trying to shove Mr. Incredible into that escape pod, and he just can't quite fit. Yeah, it was pretty much like that. So sometimes what they would do is ditch their infantry tunics and just wear their undershirts and their trousers, or they would wear these. This is known as a fatigue uniform. Now, these were originally worn by some artillery crew, but they were also worn by people who essentially weren't on the battlefield fighting. So, stable workers, truck drivers, and things like that. Denim was seen as lighter than wool, so that way it was easier for the men to get in and out of the tank. But it was also sturdier than cotton, which the standard infantry uniform came in both. Sometimes they would mix and matches, wearing a fatigue jacket over a standard shirt and trousers. Now, sometimes tankers would wear Brodie helmets, which is like the bowl-shaped helmet that you see American, British, and Canadian forces wear during World War I. But most of the time, they were wearing their overseas caps, which is this thing right here. Now, another interesting bit of headgear is this thing right here, which looks like a combination between an old-timey football helmet and a winter cap, with a hint of medieval added to it. Now, what's interesting about it is that there are very, very few surviving examples of this headgear, and practically no reproductions of it whatsoever. To which anybody in the World War I reenactment community, please make a reproduction of this. This looks so fucking cool. Back to their bodies. So, they would also wear these things, which are called jerkins. Now, jerkins have their roots in the 16th century. However, during World War I, they were worn for more practical purposes, as opposed to when they were during the 1500s. These could be worn pretty much over anything, including the standard infantry tunic. They also wore sweaters, which I cannot imagine how fucking hot it must have been inside that thing wearing it. Thank God the war ended in November. Now let's talk about the footwear. So, it actually kind of depended on the soldier. Sometimes they would wear canvas leggings, or sometimes they would wear puttees. Puttees were essentially long wool bandages that you would wrap around from the collar of your shoe almost all the way up to just below your knee. And they were worn so that way dirt or rocks or mud couldn't get into your shoes. But given that these people were in a giant fucking metal box, they didn't really see them as practical. So they would probably either just wear canvas leggings or nothing at all, aside from their boots. By the way, speaking of boots, they mostly wore either M1917 or M1918 trench boots. Now let's move on to their gear. Now, given that this is World War I, gas was very much a threat to the average soldier. So tankers were obviously issued them. Some were issued the French M2 gas mask or the French ARS-17 gas mask, which was essentially the French copy of the German M15 gas mask. It's one of the gas masks that you think of when you think of a gas mask, pretty much. Or they were issued the English SBR, or small box respirator, which, to kind of go off the subject a little bit, I actually wrote a short novella that basically involves a slasher killer during the 1930s wearing World War I fatigues and kind of wears an SBR as like their iconic mask. But back to their gear. So they wore essentially a standard M1910 pistol belt with either an M1916 holster or even an M1909 holster if they were wearing a revolver, and an M1910 or M1917 ammo pouch. The M1910 was for the 1911, the M1917 was for the revolver. They obviously weren't issued rifles because, again, they're in a giant metal box with guns that could move, so they weren't necessarily needed. But if they had to, say, get out of the tank, they were still armed. Now, some of them were also issued trench knives, which, at least for the Americans, was a long metal spike with a knuckle duster handle guard on it. So with all that information, the standard U.S. tanker during World War I would have worn something like this. Don't worry, this is an actual image. This is an AI. Officers would have probably worn something similar, but with a few exceptions. If you want more details, I suggest watching this video from the American Heritage Museum. They have this wonderful video where they talk about what U.S. tankers wore during World War I, and they go into way more detail than I do here.